Welcome to the Cestrian Central Podcast, episode number 2. I'm Samuel Pearson, and today I'm joined by Fabio Passerini.
Hello.
And Luke Armstrong.
Hello.
We also have an exclusive interview with Albert Davies, the new director at Chester FC, who unfortunately cannot be with us in the podcast, but he gives a great insight into everything Chester FC, and I hope you enjoy. In today's podcast, we are going to look back at the weekend's fixture against Scarborough Athletic, where Luke here attended the game, so he has the best insight into what happened.
Yeah, and then once we've heard from Albert, we're going to look ahead to the weekend and what's another big game for the Seals on the road at Farsley Celtic.
Right, so first of all, we're going to look back at the weekend's results. Obviously, that's what we're going to do. Luke, what did you make of the game?
Firstly, I think you have to say Scarborough were poor on the day. I think you expect a lot more from a side, third place in the league before kick-off. I think aside from set pieces, they didn't offer much of a threat. But I think on the other hand, particularly second half, Chester were very potent, especially when sort of space opened up after the red card. There was lots of opportunities, and in the end, probably could have been more than 3, I think.
I think first we should just probably look at their penalty that they got early on, really, because I think that set a good tone for the game.
Yeah, and Whitehouse, we've seen recent weeks, he's now the man for penalties, and he's shown real composure there, just stroking it into the bottom left corner.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate penalty for Scarborough to concede. It's the new handball rule. He put his hand up to protect his face, but it's just caught the Scarborough defender. But game's the game, I'm afraid. It's the rules now. But yeah, good penalty. Convincing win overall, to be honest with you. The other 2 goals from Pears and Glendon are they weren't amazing. They were tap-ins, but they were comprehensive, weren't they?
I think someone who does deserve a lot of credit is Pears. Or Pears, however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah,
but I think looking at that second goal, it comes from him, pressing high up the pitch, winning the ball back, and then obviously having the composure to put it across goal for Glendon.
And I think that's one thing Cal McIntyre thrives on with his teams at the moment, is the pressing aspect of their game. Obviously the previous game a couple of weeks ago that I went to watch, just even though Charlie Caton up front didn't score at the time, he was pressing constantly. Their midfielders push up and pressed almost as cams almost at a certain point.
I think it's something he touched on in his most recent interview after the Scarborough game. He said this team's evolved from last season, more of a counter-attacking side, and this year they're able to press higher, go toe-to-toe with the top teams in the division, which we've seen this year. So
yeah, they need to make it count more often than not, though, because I was at the Banbury game recently and they were on top for most of the game, but Banbury just sat back and played long balls over the top, and they ended up getting a lucky goal from it, really, a penalty, and it finished 1-1. They need to take the chances a little bit more, but it shows they're making progress and going from strength to strength. They got a very convincing win against Scarborough.
Yeah. And I saw that as well when I watched the Peterborough Sports game away. That finished 1-1 as well, but Chester should have, in fairness, they should have had a penalty in the first half. Which if they'd had that, they'd have got the 2-1 win. But they had quite a few more chances, which on another day, because obviously the weather was horrendous during that game. On another day, they'd have probably took some of them away, but. But they're still sat third in the league now as a result. But they're still doing very well with their hopes for promotion. So
it's certainly looking promising.
Yeah. And as well, we've got George Glendon, who is now he's the club's top scorer. He's in double
10 in
the
league
for the league
this season. Yeah.
And then Elliot Whitehouse, who's on 7, he's just behind. So their midfielders are having a very decent goal scoring return this year.
Yeah.
Which is quite good.
It's good that they're spreading the goals out as well.
It does.
No one's running away with it, really. They're all quite close to reaching that mark together.
Like you said, Fabio, I'm certain Cal will just be hoping that they can convert a few more of these chances, because all the underlying statistics, everything like that is pointing, towards this being one of the best sides in the division, and they just need to make sure they can make that count before the end of the season.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So earlier in the week, Sam here was joined by Albert Davies, General Manager at Chester FC. he asked him about his journey through the club and what he hopes to achieve in this new role.
Now on the podcast we have Albert Davies. You've just become general manager. First of all, how does it feel to be promoted to general manager now?
I think, firstly, personally, it's a really special and rewarding moment. So I sort of started out when I was volunteering here when I was 14. I'm 28 now, so the way I look at it is, I've dedicated half my life to this football club. So for it to sort of culminate in taking on this role, a real honour, a real privilege, proud to have been trusted by the board to have taken on this position, and equally really excited about what's to come. There's obviously, you would have seen there's been some changes off the field at the football club over the past week or so. Really excited to see what we can all achieve together.
And for the listeners who'll be listening to our podcast, you started off your journey at Chester Uni doing sports journalism like we did. So how did you get from there, like leaving uni, to now being in the position that you're in? What's your career pathway been?
I think, the journey probably started long before that, but I always look back fondly at university. It's the most fun you'll have in your life in many different ways. That the course allows you to be really creative, and the university were great. And equally, you make friends for life as well. It's really special. As I say, when I was 14, I sort of come down on the off chance here and started writing my own match reports. I was asked to write them for the programme when I was still doing my GCSEs, and then I started helping more as social media started to grow. It feels like so long ago now. Social media started to kick in. I started to help out on that front, and then really from there the role progressed, so that in the last half of my final year at university, I'd taken on the media officer role on a voluntary basis. I think sometimes in the football industry, in the journalism industry, a lot of your position is just about timing, and I was very fortunate that there was a sort of a postgrad internship scheme when I left university, and then eventually evolved into a part-time position here, which then evolved into a full-time position, and now we are where we are today.
Oh, very nice. So as well, now you're general manager, do you have a vision for how you want to move the club forward now in your general manager position?
Yeah, I think I've got my own ideas. I think that sort of when I speak to people about it, I think the keys in the name. It's a very general role. There's certain aspects to focus on, but really it's a little bit of everything. Obviously working with the board of directors here, working with the staff here. We've got a fantastic set of staff on a day-to-day basis and on a footballing basis, and the volunteers as well. Ultimately, that's what makes this club special, makes this club what it is. It's a fan-owned football club. Everyone chips in, we all do our extra bits, and that's probably what my role is as well, to chip in where I'm needed, where I can, probably help off field in a communication sense, making sure that staff and volunteers, those people, get what they need. Ultimately, we want them to be happy and to be in a position to succeed here. And then there's little parts. I'll be working closely with Darren Court, the new commercial manager, on that side, helping him in any way that I can. And then there's things around like the matchday experience here as we approach them sort of summer months, and it's the running and you're getting towards the big games. You want a big atmosphere, and equally you want things going on in and around the stadium like we've had in the past. Really looking forward to it, and I've definitely got my own ideas of how I see the role progressing.
How's your relationship with the manager, Callum? Like, how do you two almost work in parallel with each other in such a good way to help move the club in a positive direction?
I think firstly what's helped is that we're in a really good position where we've worked side by side. We've worked side by side for a long time now. Obviously Callum was the academy manager here when I my role started to move forward as media officer, and he was always very clear about how he wanted to work with me on the academy and the way that we promote that. We've got a really good working relationship, really good personal relationship, and we have for a long time now. So very fortunate in that sense. You know, as you know, managers are managers.
Yeah.
They're characters in their own ways. But Callum's brilliant. As long as the communication's clear between my role and his role, it makes life very easy. And ultimately, I'm aware, and I've always been taught that in your position, you've got to do everything you can to help the manager and the player succeed. You don't want them ending a game thinking, well, what if we'd done this differently? What if we'd done that differently? We've got to leave no stone unturned, if you like. We've got to do everything we can to help the team, because ultimately this is a football club, and for us to succeed, we've got to be successful on the pitch first and foremost.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. So we've just heard Albert's thoughts on his new general manager role. What did you all make of what he had to say?
Well, I think it's quite inspirational, really, isn't it? You know, he's just taking his opportunity with both hands, starting at 14, just offering to volunteer and working his way up to the top. Like he said, he had to get a bit lucky up there, but he's certainly earned his place there now, and I think he's living the dream job, supports the club, lives in Chester and everything, and now he just gets to spend all his time around the players and the staff and everybody he loves. It's fantastic.
I think hearing him speak there, he sounds, very suited to the role. I think as well, it's great to hear that he has that, good personal and working relationship with Cal. And obviously having known each other for so many years, it makes a lot of sense that they have that good relationship, which is obviously so important on and off the pitch.
And you can hear his enthusiasm and his passion for the club as well. Like, you can tell he's just obsessed with Chester FC.
You can tell he's a Chester fan at heart.
Like you can tell with the fact that he was from 14 years old doing match reports. Like, you've got to love the club that you support so much in order to write match reports from that young.
Yeah.
And the fact that he stuck it out for so long in terms of just on a voluntary basis, not getting paid to do it, but doing it just because he loved what he was doing, I think speaks volume to why, I think at 28 years old now, why he's been promoted to general manager role by the board, because they obviously see the dedication that he's put into the club now. And
yeah. It's certainly nice to see someone reap the rewards from all that hard work, from such a young age, and get, what is for him a dream role at his own club. So it's certainly a great story and inspirational for us guys as well, obviously as uni students.
Yeah, and looking forward now, I think the fact that he's worked with Callum ever since Callum was obviously part of the academy. He was the academy manager, wasn't he? And now the fact that he's still working with him, he's been promoted now to general manager role. I think him and Callum will continue to work in a great format with each other, because he knows how to. Albert knows how to promote the club. Callum's promoting the club in a way in terms of like they're getting victories, they're doing really well in the league, and I think come the end of the season, if it came down to the last couple of games where they needed 1 or 2 wins for promotion, I think their form and then the way they promote the club on their social media and stuff, I think it'll help attract big numbers in.
They could certainly
numbers,
galvanise a few estranged fans, couldn't they, and get a few more numbers in for that last push towards the end of the season.
Bring people back from the wilderness.
Yeah, I think what he's doing is incredible though. It's like you said, it's good to see someone who's like never given up and never backed down, and he's finally living his life. It's a dream job. It's amazing, really.
We're now going to have a look ahead to Chester's next game, which is against Farsley away. How do you think they're going to how do you think they're going to cope in that game?
I think you look at Farsley, first of all, you talk about the pitch. I mean, me and Rio were at the training ground earlier this week, and we spoke to George Glendon and Ben Tollett, and they both touched on how poor the pitch is and how the game could potentially turn into more of a battle, which Chester won't want to happen.
Because they like to play their intricate football, they like to play their counter-attacking football, which they might not be able to do on that sort of a pitch.
I think it's a game that the team should certainly be winning. I think Farsley won winning 14th in the league. Did lose to Tamworth at the weekend. I mean, there's shame in that. 1-0, they're a team flying, Tamworth, but it's certainly a game that Chester should be looking to win, and a big opportunity to build on that statement win at the weekend.
And it's an opportunity for them to do the double over Farsley as well, isn't it? After beating them 2-0 earlier on in the season,
all the way back in August, that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot's changed since then, but I think it's certainly... It's a very much winnable game against Farsley. They're in a bit of a turbulent run of form recently, Farsley, but I think with Chester, I think they've won... They're unbeaten in 6 now. Drawn 3 of them, obviously, granted, but they're certainly... Well, as you'd say, probably maybe the best of the rest, behind Tamworth and Scunthorpe, really, at the moment. It could turn into more of a battle, which might not suit Chester, but I think they've got the quality to get them over the line.
And I think it's one of those games where if they're seriously wanting to get promoted this season, these sort of games are the ones with like the statement games where they need to show even in adversity they can still, even if it's not a pretty game, they just need to get the result and get over the line. I think
you look around the table as well. Teams behind Chester in the league, Chorley winning games, Curzon, Alfreton. There's teams, building momentum behind them in the league, and they can't afford to fall behind in that. They need to keep up with the pace if they want to, keep that 3rd position, which will obviously be huge come the end of the season.
Yeah, it's very close. After this weekend, if results don't go Chester's way, they could be outside the playoffs, which is a bit unfortunate. But other teams have got games in hand as well. Chester don't anymore, so they just need to keep winning and keep grinding out these results otherwise.
And just hoping that teams around just start to drop off in form a little bit, really. But
yeah, especially towards the end of the season now, it could all go pear-shaped quite quickly. So they just need to keep at it and grind out these results, even if they're not at the best. Farsley's a must-win game.
I think Cal, he's talked about that 70-point marker as Cal, and about how important it is getting to that, and that he's not looking at the teams around him in the table, that it's just getting to that number of points. And they're 16 points now off that 70-point mark, which is very doable. So I think they'll certainly be relaxed about the situation and confident going into the final weeks of the season.
Time for a newer addition to our podcast now. We're going to call it the Wally of the Week. Each week we're going to pick out one individual who's maybe been a bit silly or done something that's a bit rash, be it in football or in the media, and we'll single that individual out. It's only light-hearted, but we'll poke a bit of fun at them.
So this week we have some breaking news coming out of the Chester community, really. I think that's what it comes down to. Rio Doherty, one of our co-producers on the podcast, he missed one of the Chester games this season, which is a crime. It is a crime, isn't it?
It's a cardinal sin.
Look, I think you look at Rio, he's the model of consistency for attending football games, and to see him not at that Scarborough game, is shocking, I think, for all of us. We were really shook to the core.
Yeah, come rain or shine, drunk or sober, Rio will be there.
Mainly drunk.
Mainly drunk, but he's missed out. A lot of our viewers at Chester probably know Rio. He's a character, he's lovable, and everybody seems to know him. Even when I turned up to the game and I started talking to the stewards, do you know Rio? He's one of them.
A celebrity, I think you would say.
He is a local celebrity.
Yeah. And it was the same even when I interviewed Albert. When I first arrived, he was like, "Oh, are you part of Rio's team?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm part." Yeah. It's Rio's world. We're all just kind of living in his Chester world. I
felt quite honoured to say I was part of Rio's team as well. Actually, it's amazing.
And
we should say that Rio did miss the game because he was on a university trip to Madrid, which think we can,
it's not good enough really though, is it?
I mean,
watching Chester FC, watching Atletico Madrid play, I think we know which one we'd rather watch. Chester FC,
a 3-0 win over Scarborough is not to be turned up.
Exactly. But to be fair, he made up for it by literally the day after he got back. He was straight down to the training ground to do interviews, wasn't he?
Straight there. Straight, recording some stuff. That's what he did. He couldn't keep himself away from the lads for that long.
I think he's the Wally of the week, and he's an idiot.
Yeah, and I think watching his passion during games, it was like even the Peterborough Sport game that I watched, because I couldn't make the game, but I was watching it through. The live stream that they have, and he kept popping up on the screen because obviously every time a ball went like towards the Chester's goal, Rio was stood behind. When they scored, he ran straight down to the sideline. He loves
to get himself in and amongst it, does Rio?
But he gets very
Animated.
He gets very animated,
Yeah.
doesn't he, when it's not going right? I think that's the best way to describe it.
He's a bit of a Chester ultra, really, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. And like he's always there down at the ground 2 hours before having pints. He's there after the game.
You know, he'll come. He's missed lectures because he's gone to do the frost covers. You know, things like this.
Let's hope
you know.
our lecturer isn't listening to this. But, it's true.
But I think he is how every Chester FC fan really should be.
I think,
he just,
that sort
he
of
just
commitment
epitomises
you have to
dedication
appreciate.
to a club, doesn't he? Really. So that concludes our podcast this week. I'd like to thank Albert for taking his time to be on the podcast. I'd like to thank Luke here
Pleasure.
and Fabio for coming to join me on the
been
podcast.
wonderful. Thank you for having me.
And tune in next week when I'm not sure who it will be in the studio next week, because there's a few of us, but we'll be in the studio next week to discuss more things Chester FC and have a new guest on the podcast.
We'll probably rounding up the Farsley Celtic game and looking forward to rounding up the Hereford game, depending on when the pod comes out next week.
Yeah.
And of course, don't forget Wally of the Week. I'm
Well,
sure someone
Wally of
will
the
have been
Week
up to
will
no
be
good.
a segment you'll all be looking forward to. Thank you all for listening.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
guys.